Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. This is the second webinar that we've done with Pentair, hosted by Aqua Magazine. I'm Scott Webb, editor of Aqua. I'll be your host today. I'm joined by three of the top pool professionals in the country, Tom Cucinato, Dan Lenz, and Gary Williams. Tom, I think I first met at the Fleetco Awards dinner. I think you were a perfect pool guy a few years ago. Tom owns and operates Cucinato's Pool Service in Boynton Beach, Florida. An early adopter of variable speed pool pump technology. He frequently travels the country educating pool professionals about techniques of setting up these pumps. Thanks for joining us. Dan Lenz is really an industry genius, I like to say. Good friend of mine, an industry veteran with more than 30 years of experience, who's joining us from Orland Park, Illinois, which is on the southwest side of Chicago, I think. Aside from being vice president of all seasons pools and spas, Dan also serves as the president of PHTA Midwest chapter and is the Service Council chair. Gary joins us today from Houston, Texas. Gary has 11 years of industry experience and is a certified pool operator and inspector and a licensed electrician. Thanks for joining us, Gary. I just wanted to talk briefly about some of the things we want to take away from today's discussion. As everyone knows, big changes are coming next summer. And we want to learn kind of what's going on in the industry. We've talked about the regulations themselves, but today we want to talk about what is happening on the ground with the people who are going to have to implement these changes. If you're watching now and still not 100% confident in the changes that are coming, I strongly recommend you check out the first part of the webinar series, the one we did before. That's still available, and Pentair sponsored a conversation in February that reviews really the regulations themselves in great detail. As some people know, but other people don't realize, this is one of the biggest changes that has ever happened in the industry. You can debate whether it's bigger than VGB, but it's right up there. And the big thing to remember is that about 70% of the pool pumps manufactured today are going to come off the shelves. They are going to be obsolete. They won't meet the energy requirements for compliance with the new regulations. So those won't be sold shortly after July 19th of 2020 or 2021, sorry. And people will have to adjust to that. So that's kind of what we're here to talk about today. So we've got a lot to get into. So let's get started. First, I kind of wanted to ask, let's talk to Gary first. Do you think people in the field are thinking about the new DOE regulations at this point?
At this point, Scott, I don't think people are on the construction side. I don't think there's a lot of conversation going on about it, even though a lot of the new pool builders are using the variable speed pumps. On the service and repair side, I don't even think the conversation is going on at all. And a lot of people are just still replacing a single speed pump with another single speed pump, at least here in our market, because the information just hasn't been shared as broadly as before. And again, unlike Tom and Dan, I recently, just 2 years ago, started selling these instead of selling single speed pumps, where those guys have been doing it 10 to 12 years. And to me, it just seems like there's an opportunity out there for us to make the change now instead of waiting until next year, whenever the law actually changes.
Interesting. Tom, what are you seeing out your way?
I totally agree with Gary. And one of the more interesting things that I see and constantly keep thinking about, and I'd love for you guys to tell me if you agree, but when's the last time you were at a supply house and you heard someone behind the counter say, hey, before you take this single speed pump, you might want to think about that new law that's coming out. And because of
Yeah.
what I see in all the supply houses and what's going on with my industry down here in Florida, I actually went out and filmed my own 2-minute infomercial. And it's a TV commercial that's on once a week. And it is hands down the best advertising I've ever done. And I am taking away a lot of business from pool companies that aren't listening and at least believing that this is coming to fruition.
I think that sounds like it may be the opportunity for anyone who gets to jump on these regulations is the day that's coming when you can't buy a replacement single speed pump for a 1.5 horse motor. That seems like an opportunity for people to take advantage of if they can jump on board and learn about this now.
Absolutely. There's been a saying going around our industry for quite a while, and we call it the cost of doing nothing. So if you leave or put a single speed pump or motor back onto a single speed pump and you're rebuilding it, let's think about that. Let's just do 2 years, real fast math. $1,000 a year to run. So now $2,000, 2 years. The cost of that motor and the labor, I would say that 3 of us here probably charge about $650.
Mhm. Yep.
We're at $2,650 at the end of 2 years. Now, that's a lot of money. If you put it in the IntelliFlow now, you've got a 3-year warranty and it's less money than that, except in an area like where Dan is, where they're getting a little more money per pump. Would you agree with that, Dan?
Yeah, the aspect of, our market has I think shifted a bit, at least some of the better builders and service companies into variable technology a number of years back, real big 2-3 years back for sure. Our consumers are probably a little more educated about what it is and what it does than down where you guys are at, but there's still far more single speed setups out there today than there should be. And I've actually made the argument to people that had recently purchased and installed single speed pumps that it truly is a logical thing to consider replacing it with variable technology, even though that pump maybe is only a month or a year old, because of the cost savings. There's very little, and I would argue almost nothing else that our industry is going to sell a consumer that's going to actually put money back in their pocket. Certainly we're here to provide all of these wonderful things, but variable speed pumps, they really do put money back in the consumer's pocket. And what else can you buy that does that?
Dan, I'm going to throw a huge question your way. Pretend I am I'm at a pool company and I'm just now becoming aware of this entire issue. What do I need to know about the regulations going into effect next year?
That is a big question. I think you need to start right away educating yourself as to how you're going to put pumps into applications that are appropriate, how you determine proper sizing. There isn't going to be any more replacing like for like kind of stuff. If someone's got a 1.5 horse pump out there and it needs to be replaced, it's not going to be a matter of finding the same pump or the same motor to replace it with. So what are you going to do? You really need to educate yourself and your staff, for those who have staff, as to the proper methods of looking at hydraulics, looking at flow maximums and minimums for all of the components on a pad. Everything that we deal with, filters, heaters, plumbing sizes, have the maximum amount of flow you can put through it. And some of these variable pumps out there are definitely going to be able to exceed those flows. And in our market, where we see a lot of the companies, as I said, have been installing variable technology for a long time, we find very frequently going out to installations that were done improperly, either by the homeowner themselves who found a pump online, bought it, dropped it in. They really don't understand what they're doing, and that they can't run. We've taken an IntelliFlow pump as an example. You can't run that pump at a full 3450 RPM in almost every application out there. It pumps far too much water, and you're going to cause damage to things. And it's a danger. It's a hazard that can injure people. We actually had a client just this year who did just that, and he blew the filter up while he was standing there. It literally threw him 10 feet back because he didn't know what he was doing. Now, homeowners certainly are going to get caught up in that, but people who are doing this as a professional get caught up in it too if they're not going to educate themselves as to the needs and the requirements and how to do it the right way.
That rate,
interrupt there, Scott. The one thing that everyone that's listening today should really pay attention to is Dan just said this is what he does. So I'm the guy down the street that doesn't use an IntelliFlow or doesn't use variable speed, and we put it in 6 months from now or 9 months from now, and that pump is a bad pump, and now it has to be repaired. And let's just say the supplies are gone. Who's going to look really bad at that point? That customer is going to look at me and say, hey, Tom, what do you mean this pump is no longer made? What do you mean I can't get parts for this? I'm really sorry. What am I supposed to say? I didn't know this law was here. We're pool professionals. We need to educate the customers, and always remember, an educated customer is your best customer.
That's a great point, and something that just occurred to me while Dan was talking is that in this big transition, in this big challenge, the way we handle it will affect the way the industry is perceived. If there's customers all over the country who are shaking their head at an apparent ignorance on our part, that hurts everybody. That will hurt our entire industry. Those are all customers that we need to increase the confidence of, and this is an important part of this. We've talked about what it means for an individual in terms of the maybe a competitive advantage that you may get, but this is on all of us to pull off this transition well. It's a big one. We need to kind of help some people along with the new nomenclature, the new way of talking about pumps. And Dan touched on that. For many years, we've been looking at labels that say, that talk about an uprated pump or a rating system that is now going to disappear and be replaced by total horsepower and hydraulic horsepower. And we need to kind of touch on that a little bit today. Dan, you want to take a quick swing at that?
Yeah, part of the DOE regulation is actually, I think, a blessing, because for forever there's been confusion, and there's also been a little bit of sort of smoke and mirrors going on as to what truly a pump's performance is. Many of us watching here today have some knowledge or a lot of knowledge about service factors and horsepower ratings and uprated pumps and full rated pumps. And, this levels that whole playing field. When you get into total motor horsepower, or THP as it's going to be identified, service factors are gone. Every motor is going to have a service factor of 1. So it's going to really help define exactly what is happening on the motor end of stuff. When you get into The hydraulic horsepower, then you're taking into account the aspect of the wet end of the pump. What is the wet end really going to be able to do in comparison to the motor? You know, we've got the ability of putting a 1.5 horse motor right now on a 3/4 horse impeller. And, you know, depending on how you want to market that particular pump or motor, you can market it as a 1.5 horse pump, but it's really not. It's only going to move 3/4 horse worth of water through it. So by going into, you know, and I'm sure manufacturers will adopt more and more after this regulation goes into place, labeling their pumps with hydraulic horsepower ratings, which I think is going to be a real benefit to the industry, because that's going to be a really a true definition of what a pump does. And it'll make it very easy to compare different pumps, not only within or between manufacturers, but even within manufacturers. So to me, I think the whole aspect of what's happening on that end is going to be a blessing. It's going to make things easier for consumers to be able to compare different products. It's going to make it easier for the service guys in the field to understand what they're getting into. It's going to make it a little bit easier for some of us that do certification and instruction too. A big part of training is often dealing with motors and service factors and applications. And that's all going to change in a little bit, well, right about a year now.
So, Gary, you were saying that you've begun selling variable speed for the last few years, maybe. How do you make that argument to them? How do you demonstrate to them that that's really in their best interest?
Well, there's a number of tools that we have available that I've learned just through the training, as simple as Pool IQ, which you can download on your phone or your iPad. You can go directly to Pentair's website, and there's calculators out there where you can put in the amount or the cost of your energy, and then you can utilize that tool to then look at how long you run the pump, what type of pump is there currently, and it'll actually calculate a savings. And it just makes so much sense for us and for the homeowner. The benefits, I mean, if you can save a homeowner $600, kind of to what Tom was talking about earlier, $600 a year in energy savings over the course of 2 years, I mean, that's $1,200. And on top of that, the pump is still under warranty. And it's in our market, we run pumps long enough to save them between $800 and $1,000 a year. So once I start to tell homeowners about the fact that, sure, I can put this single speed in, but I will be doing you a disservice because you are, one, getting old technology that's not safe, and I can put this actual variable speed pump on and allow it to perform better, save you energy, and it's going to last a lot longer for you and make your pool a lot more efficient.
Tom, you've thrown out a few good phrases I think might work with customers. How do you is there a particular phrasing or approach you take with a customer as you're trying to make this argument?
It's so easy to sell this pump. Gary touched on a bunch of it. I've had the pleasure of working with Gary, and he will tell you the one thing that no one should be doing ever is walking into a backyard to meet a homeowner without their phone or an iPad. If you've got these tools with you and you're there and you do a cost calculator straight out from Pentair's website, you are going to sell that pump. One of my biggest phrases, though, to answer you is, if you really, really want me to put in a single speed pump, you're basically telling me it's okay to steal from you. You want to give your money to the power company, and I'm trying to keep that money in your bank account. And they just look at you with a glazed look like, boy, you're really passionate about it. So again, back to the TV commercial, it's all about educating, and everyone learning that you really care. It's not just about making a couple of bucks and leaving the backyard.
And working with Tom, I'll tell you too, Scott, it's not, I don't really sell the pump anymore. It sells itself. Once you give the homeowners the information, it's a no-brainer. It just makes too much sense. There's not a reason not to put it in.
Gary, it never catches in their throat the upfront price. That never really, knocks them for a loop.
At this point, because we focus on the saving side for the homeowner, we talk about the benefits, what it does, the safety aspects. At that point, they already know that they're going to recover the money, and it's an investment anyway. Because if you look at the difference, and they sell for higher up there than we sell here in Texas. But if I'm already going to charge you $600, and now we're talking about a $900 difference, and you were already going to spend $600. I mean, it's too close. I mean, $1,500 versus $600. The homeowners, they actually thank me for it later on. And this is one of the things I've done after I sat with Tom and learned some of his techniques and styles. I actually was so much of a believer. I started telling homeowners, I will actually buy the pump back from you if I can't save you money if you use my program.
That's cool.
One of the other things, Scott, is that I'll tell them if I see that they're on that fence about the cost, I will give them two options. You can make 3 payments to me, 2 payments. I know my customer well enough to read what I can do to help them out. But the other thing is, hey, you know what, Mrs. Smith, let's put it on your credit card. Every month, I'm telling you, I'm going to save you $100. Put it on your credit card. And then every month, that $100 that I'm saving you for us, it's FP&L down here is our power company. Instead of paying them, get your Sky Miles, put it on your credit card. They're like, you know what? That will work.
Oh, I like that. Do you ever run into a customer that just digs their heels in and says, I don't care? I know that a couple of you mentioned earlier, and I've heard before that there are pool companies now that just aren't stocking single speed pumps anymore. Do you ever run into that customer that says, I don't care, I just want a single speed replacement just like I had, don't tell me anything else? Do you ever have to deal with that?
Yes, I deal with it all the time. The one thing that I do, you make sure I give them a copy of the law. And then as a pool professional, we all need to make sure that they understand that we're using the right pump for that pool, as Dan's been talking about, the pipes, the filters, the hydraulics of the pools. There's different pumps for different applications that are all variable speed pumps. And it's easy to get around. And if they still won't bite, then I'm done. I'm not your pool guy. I won't do it.
I wanted to kick this one back to Dan. We talked a little bit about sizing, and I'm sure that's a big part of what concerns a lot of people in the field now. What do I do when I've lost my rating? I've lost, the fact that I always just replaced an old, 1.5 horsepower pump with a new one, and now all you see is total horsepower and hydraulic horsepower. Is there some kind of guide for people? Is there something out there to help people face that and figure out what kind of pump to get in that circumstance?
There's not that I'm aware of any one, sort of magic book to open up and say, okay, this is what you got, this is what you can put in. It's probably something that could be done more on a regional level by, we could probably put together something that would work for our purposes to that extent. But, the issue with that, there are so many pumps out on the market already, out in the field already for, some of them are even 15, 20 years or more old. But what we do with our staff is arm them with as much knowledge as possible. So in our Midwest market, there are a number of pumps that are seen out there, having those pump curves so that you know where that pump was designed to perform, and then matching those pump curves to the pump that you're going to be replacing it with to know that you're going to get similar performance where needed, and knowing that you're going to get proper turnover rates. You know, I always want to see the water in a pool turnover at least twice a day, at least twice a day. And when our technicians go and install these things, or when we build pools, that's what we gauge everything on, is we run our pumps 3 to 4 hours a day at a higher speed that might be more comparable to a current, 1.5 horsepower full rated pump, to help with skimming and things like that. And then the rest of the day it's running at other speed where we're getting the energy conservation, but we're still achieving at least 2 complete turnovers of the water in the pool every day. So it's, it's math, right? I mean, you've got to be able to look at the situation. You've got to be able to, and, in all of the teaching of stuff that I do through the industry, I see that math often is a bit of a struggle for people. Being able to know how much water is in a pool, that you got to start from somewhere when you're dealing with the service end of things, and that's a place to start. My pool got 20,000 gallons, 28,000 gallons, 32,000 gallons. What does it mean in terms of turnover twice a day? Backing into that, then looking at a pump curve and putting the pump into an application that it's going to be able to achieve those results. So there isn't a good single source for that. You've got to be able to understand what it is that you're being asked to do, and understand the principles of the physics behind it all, and then apply it real world. It's one of these situations that, back in high school and college, you go through a math class and say, what do I ever need to know that for? A lot of that comes into play here. Just simple volume calculations of a swimming pool as an example. So arm yourself with the right tools, have the knowledge, go and find the training. All the manufacturers are doing training continuously. Different associations like the PHTA offers training, and get that knowledge now, so a year from now you can be considered an expert on it, as opposed to your competitor down the street who maybe doesn't know and is caught a little blindsided by when this regulation comes into play, and they can't buy single speed stuff anymore at the local supply house.
Interesting. We asked a real expert on pumps, and basically it's been part of this whole process from the beginning, Jeff Farlow, to watch this and maybe chime in. I'm going to see if I'm going to bring him in briefly to talk about some of these issues with hydraulic horsepower. Jeff, are you listening in on this?
Yeah, Jeff is here.
Can you just talk briefly about how hydraulic horsepower and total motor horsepower came into the picture, and just a brief idea of how some people out there in the field who are having to size pumps can face that?
Sure. I think Dan did a good job earlier talking about this, but where we started in this industry was that rated horsepower and that service factor. And then based a couple years ago, 10 years ago, California required us to put the total horsepower on there, but we've really never paid attention to that in the past. It was all just rated horsepower and service factor, and that rated horsepower value really had so little meaning. It was not a standardized, there was nothing consistent across manufacturers or even across different product families. So it just wasn't a defined value. And that was one of the things. And then we put the uprate, full rate in there, as Dan said, and it just made it totally confusing. And I'm going to go as far as to say sort of worthless, but it was what we had. When Department of Energy started this process, they looked at that and said, how in the world can we begin to form a regulation around a pump when, based on its size, when your current method of sizing it is just so, I'm going to use the word loosey-goosey. It's just so undefined. And so that's where the hydraulic horsepower was developed. So we can truly determine what the size is of the pump, and that's based on the size of its wet end, which is going to determine what kind of performance you get out of the pump, not just the size of the motor that's attached to it. You can take two identical pumps with the exact same hydraulic horsepowers, put a 2 horsepower motor on one and a 1 horsepower motor on the other. And if they have the same hydraulic horsepower, you're going to get the same performance, regardless of how big that motor is that's attached to it. So, I think it was, I think Dan's words were, it was a blessing that this came about. And, I'd have to agree with that we needed to get rid of that old system with that up rate, full rate. It just wasn't doing our industry any favors.
Interesting. Thank you. We've talked about different aspects of this, and there's so many sides to this. Also in play is, what this means for the companies that can really move in and start selling a lot of variable speed pumps. Gary, what kind of difference have you seen in terms of your profitability when you began to get into selling variable speed pumps? Is it a more profitable enterprise?
The short answer to that is yes, without a doubt. And there's a number of reasons why. And again, the training and the learning to get to the point where I was comfortable in selling the pump, it also forced me to learn other aspects of equipment and how well it worked. And I'll give you an example. So a variable speed pump, where I would normally walk in, and I'm sure these guys can attest to this. If you sell a single speed pump, you're going to make out of that $650, you're probably looking at about $200 profit, maybe $250. Now you're talking about selling a $1,500, $2,000 pump. Well, now you're talking about making that $600 became your profit. So you're making 2 to 3 times more just on the pump for the company. Now, in doing so, you did the most important thing, which was taking care of your customer. Then you made more money for yourself, and you also built some trust with that customer, especially down the road. So if anything else breaks, or while you were there, if you got to look at anything else in the backyard and made any suggestions, now they trust you. So I have sold an IntelliFlow pump, or started there, and replaced an entire equipment set on more than one occasion, because I earned that trust from the customer, and then I explained to them the benefits and some of the other technology that was out there. And I'll give you an example, and I didn't know this, that you can even control you can use your watch to control your easy touch or systems, or even the new IntelliCenter. And once you start talking to some of these tech happy customers that love those type of things, one thing leads to another. So profit wise, I'll tell you again, from 2 years ago to today, our bottom line number has more than tripled.
Oh.
Yeah, I agree. All of us tend to be pushed to the max when it comes to time, right? And in our market, where we're really dealing with about a 6-month season, we are very pressed for time. I've got technicians commonly working 70, 80-hour weeks, and if you can spend an hour and a half putting in a pump where you're making $300 or $400 profit, or spend the same amount of time putting in a pump that you're making twice that profit, it just makes sense to as Gary said, you're providing a product for the client that they're going to end up benefiting for many, many years over, and you're making more money in the process of doing it. It really is a win-win. We started getting into variable technology in a big way 7, 8 years ago. We've been installing these pumps for every bit of 15 years, maybe more. But 7, 8 years ago, we kind of made a push. And actually what drove that push is I put one on my own pool. My single-speed whisper flow pump had bearing problems after 6, 7 years of operation, and I put it on my own pool and saw in that first 6-month season, it saved me $450 in my electric bill. Well, it didn't prove to me, I always knew that was a possibility, but it showed me how now I need to educate our customers to that savings. So we started along that line. We really got a boost about 4 or 5 years ago when the local power companies started offering rebates on them, because that helps facilitate it proves it's not just smoke and mirrors to the consumer. Our power company started out with a $400 rebate on these pumps. It's at $275 right now. It's been slightly, reduced over the years, but it's still a significant rebate. And when you put that out in front of the consumer, they go, "Wow, this really okay. This is real time stuff. I mean, I get this now." So from 5 years ago, even after being into variable stuff for 2 or 3 years, variable pumps back then represented about half of our pump sales. Last year, they represented 95% of our pump sales.
Wow.
So, this year we're right there about the same kind of numbers, variable over single speed, and I'm sure we're going to be having revenue of probably $250,000 or more on variable pumps through 2020 by the time we hit the end of the year. So it definitely is a good thing from the financial aspect of a company, and makes your bottom line a lot healthier for sure.
Tom, I was going to say, you have a reputation as an authority, and I just wonder if the time that you invested in learning all this has added to the prestige of your business, when you talk to a customer, has that paid off for you over the time of your business?
Oh, absolutely. Everything that I've worked for the past 13 years, I've been in business for 26, but the last 13 years, that's when I started selling in the variable speed pump. And to match Dan, I'm probably 99.9% variable speed sales that's what I use. And the only reason there'd be a 0.1 would be for a small fountain or houses that are in foreclosure. And so I'm helping out the bank. And it's just, that's all that they're going to do. But yes, the notoriety, people know me around town because of the TV commercial. And I tell everybody out there, I've tried the postcards, like Dan said. I've done all the different types of advertisements. Other than the movie theater, that was really pretty cool. That worked really well. I was selling at least 8 pumps a month from it flashing up between every movie or before the movie would start. But when it comes to the TV, there's nothing that's been more educational to the customers. And when I get in the backyard, they go, "Wow, you really are the same guy that we saw on TV. You are dedicated to saving us money."
Gary, I was just thinking while Tom was discussing that I do talk to a number of service people who really believe that this is a burden that's been placed on them, that this this came along from the federal government and has caused a problem in their business. Do you believe in your heart that these changes will end up benefiting your customers?
Without a doubt, I believe that they're going to benefit our customers as well as our company. And I'm going to share something that's probably really important for the people that are listening right now. So I actually learned what I know and watched firsthand from Tom. I was actually at a Pentair training. Tom came in and spoke, and it grabbed my attention whenever he mentioned the law. And I said, you know what, I'm going to embrace it now. And not only am I going to embrace it right now, I'm going to actually see this man perform and work, and I want to see it happen. Ironically, we got a call. It was right around the time that the freeze had happened, and that's when our motors start to lock up down here. And I pulled Tom aside and said, "Hey, I have a customer. His motor is out. He needs to have a replacement done. can you show me firsthand how you do this? And Tom actually got on the phone with the customer, went through step by step, and I kid you guys not, it took less than 8 minutes. And Tom, after the customer heard all the information, the customer actually didn't even want to know the price. He had already said, yes, I want that pump because of the savings. And again, I'm sharing this because you don't have to do it by yourself. Find somebody that in your market that is and has the knowledge. Jump in, grab them, ask them to help you. That exact same day, I had 2 more pumps go out, and I, without Tom being there, but just listen to what he explained to everybody, sold 2 more variable speed pumps from listening to him. And since that day, I mean, if someone calls and we have a motor that's out, or we have a customer that calls us because they saw one of our ads, we're selling variable speed pumps. The key to the whole thing is, yes, it's gonna happen. Don't wait till the last minute because you're gonna be so far behind. Find a Dan of the world, find a Tom of the world, find these guys that have the knowledge already, grab them and start to learn. If they're willing to share, don't let this get in the way of your learning and your training.
Yeah. Good point. Dan, on that same topic of mentorship and, working with your company, working with people and spreading that advice and helping people get on board with this, what advice do you have for people watching this webinar about how to educate themselves and how to spread this among their employees?
The education, like Gary said, if you can find somebody to piggyback off of their knowledge, it's probably one of the best ways of doing it. The manufacturers are certainly great at providing some help that way. Any opportunity that someone might have to even have, one of your local sales reps from your pump company come out to your business and help you, even if it's in the field. Most of these guys, they love doing that kind of stuff. Set it up that, hey, I'm going to go on a couple of calls this week. Can you come meet me at these sites, show me what I need to know, what I need to look for to know that I'm applying the right pump for the right situation and that I'm able to do what I need, but also help me in talking with the customer to put the right words out there that are the ones that help drive the decisions. I think Tom said a lot of those things already today as to how, keywords that he uses to influence decisions. And, for my own purpose, because I've got the product in my own yard, getting real world experience of what I encounter is key. And the tools, Gary had mentioned earlier about the pool IQ that Pentair has, being able to do energy comparisons or audits and showing people what you can achieve by it. There are so many tools out there that many of us maybe don't have the knowledge that they're even there. Talk to your reps at the companies and download those tools and then go out and apply them.
Makes sense. Okay, Tom, I'm going to be a service tech, and this is the first time I've really taken this seriously. I logged into this webinar today, and I've learned some things. Can you give me a couple practical things to do right now or soon to start down the road of educating myself, coming up to speed, learning how to talk about this with customers, learning how to turn this to my advantage?
I think Dan pretty much just hit it. You've got to have all the tools as far as you've got to have the cost calculator with you. You've got to have a copy of the DOE law. And in doing this and having all this in your possession when you're with that customer, it makes you look a lot better than the other guy that's doing the pool next door or somebody else. If they're bidding a job out, that's where it's really important. If you're just handing someone a brochure of a pool pump and say, hey, there's a new law coming, take a look at this pump, this is what they're saying we should use, but it's, $1,800 installed, and you'll probably just want me to put in a regular single speed like you already have. That's the wrong approach, and that's what's happening right now. You've got to take charge of that conversation to educate that customer, and it's going to sell itself.
I wanted to get to some of we've actually piled in a load of questions from people watching the webinar today, and I wanted to make sure we got to those in the time we have remaining. The first one I think is a really good one. This comes from Brent Large, who says, I thought the single speed pumps would be sold after the 2021 deadline, but not manufactured anymore. Dan, can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, that is correct. Any inventory that exists as of July 19th of next year can still be sold, and product, if it's still available, if there are warranty issues, the manufacturers can still provide single speed stuff as replacements under warranty considerations. But if you're running out in 2020 and early 21 stocking up on single speed stuff because you want to be that guy that's got the cheapest pump around and the rest of it, I feel sorry for you. You really don't want to be doing that. If you got a warehouse full of stuff or a truck full of stuff that's old stuff, old technology, not current accepted product, you're going to show yourself to be something other than what you want to be. I find that businesses in our industry that succeed are the ones that are leading the way, not following behind everybody else, being the last ones to get on board. Embrace the regulation, embrace the technology, become comfortable with it in the next year so that when it does hit, you're already used to it, and don't get caught up into that game of, because technically I can still sell it if I own it and I have it in my warehouse in my possession. We are not going to be bringing in much in terms of single speed stuff anymore. To be honest with you, I think we're out of single speed stuff right now. Certainly our industry has some issues with supply shortages and so forth. And it's a bit of a blessing because I did have concerns going into this year before all COVID locked us down and so forth that we would have a lot of single speed stuff left over, and that would be an issue because I don't want to be selling it after July of next year at all. I want to be like Tom is 100% variable and get rid of that last 5% that we've got lingering around.
Can I flip that question? I want to flip it right back to Mr. Large. I didn't hear his first name. Would you buy yourself, if you're the customer, would you buy that pool pump knowing that it's no longer going to be manufactured? It's no different than buying a TV. If I could go right next door and get a TV that I know is the TV that's going to be sold for the next 10 years or more, why would I buy the TV at the other place that's telling me it's not going to be made anymore? I wouldn't do it. So why would your customers do it?
I just happen to think of something that we haven't really touched on, but I'm sure, Tom, you've been putting these things in a long time. You've experienced this too. Single speed pumps, OEM motors on a pump, they've got a 5 to 7 year life expectancy to them. And we have countless numbers of variable speed pumps that were installed 13, 14, 15 years ago that are still out there running today. Back when I built my own pool in 2006, I built a pool in a neighboring community, and it was a very water feature rich pool. So we had 2 or 3 IntelliFlow pumps that we put on that pool. Last year it's the first that I remember replacing a variable speed pump. Those 2 out of the 3 are still going today, and only one of them had an issue as of a year ago, and at that point it was, 14 years old. You don't see that very frequently on single speed stuff. The motors run too hot, the wear and tear is too great. So in addition to energy savings, you're going to have a longer useful life out of the product too. So, again, those of you that might consider stocking up on single speed, that's not something I would ever tell you should do.
That's a good point. I got a great question here from someone watching who has very low electricity costs. So the savings, we're talking down to 9 cents a kilowatt hour. The savings are not as great for a place like that. Are there other arguments to be made beyond the obvious one, which is this is the only pump that's going to be legal here pretty soon, that helps sell a variable speed pump? Gary, could you speak to that?
Yeah, understanding the versatility of the pump is a big part of it as well. There's so many other factors, and because you can literally have a single cartridge pull where you put a 2 horsepower on and you don't create a problem. Well, you can take a variable speed pump and you can adjust the pressure so that you make sure that you can regulate the flow. So there's the variable speed and then there's the variable flow. So you can program these things to where they never go over 60 gallons a minute. And it's a behind the scenes programming to keep the customers from either injuring themselves or going back and trying to change it later on. So the benefits aren't just on the cost savings. These pumps are so smart. There's tons of features in there that helps protect you as well, just outside of the energy savings.
And actually, piggyback on that, Gary, the variable flow pump that we use a lot is it's just an incredible piece of equipment. Being able to program GPM instead of RPM, it takes all the guesswork out of it. You don't have to get your pressure and vacuum gauges to know what kind of polar dynamic head you're operating against. And you can also set limits in terms of back pressure. So you can program that pump that it knows when your filter is getting dirty, right? So if we want to run a pump at 50 gallons a minute through a certain filter, the other neat thing about that pump is that it maintains that flow rate, right? So if the filter gets dirty, instead of setting RPM, by setting GPM, it's going to maintain that 50 GPM as against the back pressure because of the dirt in the filter. Now, when you set the threshold in the back pressure, it's going to know when that back pressure is getting to a point that it's exceeding the tolerances that you set, and it will start to then drop down the RPMs and thus the GPMs. But it's a heck of a piece of equipment that beyond cost savings, 9 cents, and I would argue 9 cents a kilowatt hour. We're about 13 cents a kilowatt hour, and I think I said earlier it saved me $450 the first year I put it on, and that's in a 6-month season. So at 9 cents a kilowatt hour, you're still going to save a tremendous amount of money, especially if you're in a Sunbelt state that runs 12 months a year.
Mm-hmm. Without a doubt, I would encourage whoever wrote that question to download the PoolPad Pro or the Pool IQ and just plug some numbers into the calculator, just to take a look at what the savings potentially could be. Sorry about that, Tom. Go ahead.
No, I just was real quick going to say, important sales pitch for all of us out there is variable speed. Most of them, single speed, come with a standalone 3-year warranty when you're dealing with an IntelliFlow. Single speed pumps still only have 1-year warranty. And then the law is here. It's already here.
I think we've got time for one more, and I think it's a really good one because it goes back to kind of the beginning. I talk with guys like you all the time who've been, in the variable speed world for so long, they kind of forget where we all started with this. Back in the affinity law, and when ages ago, decades ago, the industry began to realize why variable speed pumps are so much more efficient. And then we just got to question, why are these pumps so much more efficient? Tom, you want to get into that?
It's really simple, and this is something you need to share with your customers. So the way a variable speed pump works, and I'm going to talk specifically about the IntelliFlow. It's got 10 sets of magnets in it. So the best way to describe it, best analogy is to tell the homeowner, it's like a hybrid car. When a single speed pump kicks on, it's like taking your foot, mashing the gas pedal to the floor from the minute you start to the minute you stop. So 10 hours of runtime, it's like turning 30 to 32 light bulbs on in your house all day long. You put a variable speed pump in and you run that same variable speed pump for the same amount of time because of those magnets, because it's helping it spin on its own. You're talking about turning on, in most cases, maybe 4 or 5 light bulbs all day long. That's why it's so efficient. It is so well made, and that's why it's won Energy Star approval 3 or 4 years in a row now. Another interesting fact that I learned is that I buy a house today. I rip out all my appliances, everything. They all are Energy Star approved. And I put in the IntelliFlow on that house. You combine the cost savings of every appliance that I put in the house, it still will not match the monthly savings that the IntelliFlow will save. And that's a fact.
Well, this has been great. I've learned a lot. Appreciate you guys letting us in on the expertise that you've gained over the years. That will conclude our webinar. We will have another webinar later this year. You can visit pentair.com/pump-regulations for more information, and for people who are just getting into it, that's a very good place to start. Thanks, gentlemen, for coming, and we'll see you out in the field.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good one.